Hello and welcome back to another presentation of God, Family, and Country. This is Robert coming to you from an undisclosed location within the Everlasting Hills. And this is something that I've been wanting to get at for a very long time, and it's part of the Last Day Macro Timeline. If you haven't watched that video, please watch that video so you can get a quick overview of all the different events on that Last Day Macro Timeline. And as you can see right here, this is part 1 of 40. Yes, that's right, 40. I don't want to do any more than that because if it were micro, it would be in the triple digits. So I'm going to try and release these as quick as I can get them out. I have a little bit of time right now, but there's still a lot of other things taking my time. So with that being said, let us move right into it. And as always, you can check out the blog where all these presentations are made available free of charge. You can see that in the video description below. The link is there. Check out this and other great things as well. And so, all right. So this is something that if you watched the Last Day Macro Timeline video, you'd be familiar with. And if you haven't, again, feel free to watch that. And you're here. This is what we're going to focus on, this first event, and then I'll just be going through all these subsequent events on up until the great and dreadful day of the Lord, which the timeline continues on. But for our purposes here, this is what we're going to be talking about, and it is the Gentiles gather to America, win independence from England, and become yet a mighty nation. And as with all these parts that I'll be doing, the one of 40, this being one of 40, this is an exhaustive or comprehensive list of scriptures. This is enough to wet your whistle, get your appetite going, for you to go further into the scriptures, the standard works, conference talks, even some scriptural doctrinal commentary. And I apologize if you can hear the thunder. I'll take it. We've been so very dry here, and so it's such a blessing of God's then to receive the rain. So again, I apologize if you hear some thunder periodically throughout this presentation. All right, so what is amazing about the Book of Mormon is it is very specific, not only to the latter days, but to the people on the American continent or the Promised Land, where the New Jerusalem would be built. It is meant for the entire world. The restoration of the gospel, as it talks about all throughout the Book of Mormon, but it gives very specific details, and a student of the Book of Mormon will come to see this very quickly, that it talks about not only the people that were inhabiting the continent, but those people that would come to inhabit the continent at a later time, but also those that were inhabiting the continent at the time that the sacred record was being written and recorded and compiled. So, not sure if a lot of you know this, but I'm just going to assume that you don't. So, in the Book of Mormon, it was a land and a people were foreseen in vision centuries before even the meridian of time, or when Christ would come. The prophet Nephi saw a man that would be acted upon by the Spirit of the Lord, and another prophet would call the native peoples as an idolatrous and indolent people. That can be found in 1 Nephi 13:12, and the prophet Mormon talks about that as well, when the people would be the descendants of those inhabiting the American continent during the Book of Mormon time, when they'd be discovered by European settlers and explorers. And then later, the prophet Jacob, 500 years before the birth of Christ, would be shown, and he prophesied that there would be no king raised up over this people in the latter days, or even over the land. And that's found in 2 Nephi 10:11-14. It even goes further on to describe the downfall of the Indian nations being foretold. And you have to ask yourself that who other than inspired men of the Lord would have predicted the following events? I mean, and history is full of that. Hernando Cortez with 400 men, 200 natives, and 14 guns plundered and subjugated the entire Aztec civilization that had several million inhabitants. Tenochtitlan was a huge capital city that was conquered. And then another Francisco Pizarro with just 160 Spaniards. Mind you, they were near on the brink of starvation. They took over the mighty Incan Empire down in South America. And then the Lord, even in the Book of Mormon, said that these and other men would pour out their wrath upon the Indian nations, scattering and driving them like a whirlwind. 1 Nephi 15:17, 2 Nephi 26:15 through 19, and even the prophet Isaiah, basically Nephi's contemporary in the Old World in the Old Testament, predicted that in Isaiah 29:1 through 3. But as always, there's that inspiring and good news that the Gentiles that would settle this land would not utterly destroy the native inhabitants, but they would have the natives would have a place. The Lamanites would have a place of prominence. That will be discussed later in part 10 of this series. And I would even recommend you check that out and see 2 Nephi 10:17 through 18. So, moving forward, we can also find too that in the Book of Mormon it talks about the American colonies will win their independence. Nephi prophesied of the war between the Gentiles, the colonists of this nation, with their mother Gentiles, Great Britain or England, as they've come to know. And that's in 1 Nephi 13:16 through 19. However, even with that prophecy, it still came at great cost and sacrifice, not only to the colonists, but even some of the leaders. It was said they pledged their lives, fortune, and sacred honor. If founding fathers were caught, they'd be hung for treason. And even the 8 years of the Revolutionary War was not easily won. There was a lot of hardship on not only for the colonists, but especially those fighting between disease, lack of supplies, food, not getting paid, their due from Congress. It just, again, against the most powerful army in the world at the time. And down here, I've put some of the amazing miracles that aren't talked about in the Book of Mormon, but I think are still very worth checking out. There's the Indian prophecy about George Washington, when he was involved in the French and Indian War. I'll probably just do some little snippets on each one of these in a different presentation under the country playlist. There's the miracle of the summer fog, which happened in obviously the summer, and it was the Battle of Long Island. Quite the miracle as far as escaping utter ruin, the army of Washington. There's also the miracle of the summer rain, and the crossing of the Delaware on Christmas Day, and even early on in the war, there's a seizure of powder and arms at Fort Ticonderoga, which was key to the siege of the British-occupied Boston. And then, of course, the Winter Valley Forge, and that painting made famous by Arnold Freiberg, with Washington praying next to his horse. That was also these are just one of many of the miraculous events that accompanied the Revolutionary War. Something that is being erased from our history books, and yet is something that you can't chalk it up to a coincidence. So, and something also too that's talked about in the Book of Mormon is the Promised Land's role in the premillennial reign. After the flood waters receded off the continents of North America, the Lord declared that this land would be choice above all other lands. Ether 2:10 through 17, and that one day it would be the place for the New Jerusalem. 3 Nephi 20:22, the Savior is discourse to the Nephites and Lamanites here, and Ether 13:2 through 6 talks about it. There's quite a bit in the Book of Ether for just having 31 pages. It talks so much the doctrines and the things talked about the latter days, and even the days in which we live is chock full within those short pages. And of course the Lord needed to lay the foundation for a celestial government, or the eventual celestial government that would be here on this earth. and that is found in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and the type of and caliber of men that he needed to establish such a government. And that can be found in D&C 101, 77 through 80, D&C 98, 5, and 6. And additionally, what is talked about is a nation and people above all others. Now, that's not to say that we should be looking down upon other nations, but that there is some exceptionalism to this land, and that's because the Lord has always reserved a choice land for others. He did it with the children of Israel when he led them out of Egypt, and he did it with not only the original Adam and Eve, which a lot of church members don't know about that. The land of Canaan was here in the American continent, and then, of course, after the floods washed away the wickedness on this earth, the Lord then brought select groups of people here to the Promised Land. And it talks about that in 1 Nephi 13:15, 22, chapter 22 and 7, chapters 2 and 8 in the Book of Ether, and 3 Nephi 6:27 through 30, and chapter 7, 6, and 9. And of course, there's many other verses that talk about that. But that, of course, comes with where much is given, much is required. And in order for America to continue to stay great, people must continue to keep and follow the commandments that God has outlined for them. And there's a great video, if you haven't seen it, where it's called America, a Covenant. So definitely check that video out as well. And as always, thanks for watching. Again, you can visit the blog to access this presentation, others free of charge. See the link in the video description below. I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation, and as always, I appreciate it, and hopefully you gained something out of this. And I will catch you next time here on God, Family, and Country, and God bless.